Breaking the gray.
Welcome back to Rebel Scientists, the podcast where we explore bold health trends, cutting-edge science, and unconventional ideas. I'm Chantel, your new host, joined by the founder of CERA Thrive and Rebel Scientist herself, Sarah Turner. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Chantel.
And today we are so excited to welcome our guest, Sandy Martin, the visionary behind the Biohacker Expo. And we had an amazing time in December in Las Vegas together. How are you doing, Sandy?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Great. Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Yeah, we had a great time in Vegas at the A4M.
Yes.
Hanging out. That was a great show, but of course we've got an even greater show to talk about.
Exactly. Very exciting.
But yeah.
Two very different styles.
Yeah, sure.
Well, leave your suit jacket at home. Wear your sneakers. Sure. No, it's not that kind of show.
Yeah, leave your suit jacket, bring your animals.
Yeah,
yes.
We were wondering if there was going to be some animals willing to try out some red light therapy at the event.
I think so. I think I might even bring my dog, but I'm not sure if he's going to want to get on a plane again. He had a rough time the last time.
Oh dear, of course you're not in Miami anymore. Well, for people who are kind of wondering which event we're talking about, of course we're talking about the fabulous Biohacker Expo that Sandy's going to host in Miami on the 28th of February at the Hilton, right? At the convention center near the airport.
That's right. It's the Miami Airport Convention Center.
Yeah, which is where you were for the last two times.
This is my second time. So it's my first
time.
My first time. Yeah, it was last year.
All right.
Yeah, you were one of my first.
Yeah. Great. I think I must have been at that event before. Yes, I remember now. I went to some kind of bodybuilding show there too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, but it's a great venue because it's near everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Sandy, how did you start? How did the idea or the concept of Bio Expo start?
Well, it's a kind of a funny story because I used to run Comic Cons.
Oh, cool! I've been to a few actually.
Have you? Oh, yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. Have you been to ones in South Africa?
Yes, one in South Africa and the one in London because my ex was a big fan. So yeah.
So the company that bought Florida SuperCon that I co-owned was also bought those shows. So you've been to similar events.
Interesting. Yeah, they're amazing. Like it was so interesting to see the games and things that happen there. And
it's really just a spectacle of creativity. I love walking around and seeing all the handmade costumes.
Yeah,
because
that is like the best part.
It's not like Halloween. People aren't buying things off the shelf. They're making these costumes themselves. So there's so much heart in everything that's going on there. And there's so much art in the room too.
Yeah.
And so, people think of it as a little celebrity obsessed, but it's really a fountain of creativity. And that's what I love about Comic-Cons. But I got a brain injury, which I prefer now to call a brain upgrade, that started in October of 2020 when I was exposed to mold and didn't know. It took me 6 months to figure out what happened. And if it wasn't for Dave Asprey, I would have never known. When I was trying to figure out how to get my brain working again. And I just thought it was stress. I thought it was burnout. I loved my life. I loved my work. I loved everything I was doing. But I was like, it's just like I stayed up too late. I just overdid it. Like, you know how you feel groggy the next day, like you just can't get going. I felt that way in increasing measure every day of my life from October 2020 until I figured out what was wrong with me. I just couldn't shake it. And I had several misdiagnoses from doctors and I had to just figure it out on my own. But it was so bad that I had to stop working. I couldn't work through a to-do list. And so cognitively speaking, everyone who was slower than me was outpacing me by 3-5 times my speed when I was not doing well. And it shook me, right? Mm-hmm. So as a woman running a company, really on the ball, transforming things from live events to virtual events during COVID. I built the infrastructure myself. I really, really was on it and loved it. And then everyone I was training was outpacing me. And I'd never had that experience in my life. So I knew something was really wrong. And then, so it started in my brain. And then it went down to the rest of my body, and the inflammation just took over everything to the point where I had peripheral neuropathy in my fingers and toes. And it was just a really terrifying time. But Dave Asprey described a brain scan he'd had with Dr. Amen. And that brain scan had a slide like my brain scan did that showed toxic exposure. And like him, I didn't have a reason to have any sort of toxic exposure. I had never been a heavy drinker or done drugs or anything like that. And so his story was mold. And I was like, well, I guess I'll test for mold now. And then when it came back positive, I said, okay, what do I do now? So I'm going to skip over the terrible details of that for a moment and answer your question. I was not working for about 2.5 years. And the mold changed my personality so much that I really couldn't go back into those Comic Cons and running 50,000 person events. It wrecked my marriage too. I just wasn't the same person anymore. And we're best friends now. I mean, he'll bring his dog to my event.
Great.
But I couldn't bring the same level of boss bitch that I had been before to the work. And I had to do something different. So my bold idea was I was going to run a metaphysical event with crystals and sound healing. And then we were at a meeting with a lawyer, and the lawyer asked him how I was different before and after the mold. And he said, and I quote, the boss bitch comes from him. Well, she used to be a real boss bitch, but now she sits in a corner and plays gongs. And I thought, that's just not me. I was really, really beat up in that moment, held it inside. I called him that night and I said, what do I do? And it's not who I am. And he goes, well, why do you like the gongs so much? And I said, well, they're biohacking. And he goes, well, then do that.
Oh.
And I didn't know what he meant. I'd never been to a biohacking event. I didn't know they existed. And so as a woman who'd been running events for 15 years, I knew I could put on anything. And so I just started planning. I built a website. I had a brand. And then it was 2 months later, I went to my first biohacking event.
So did you have the SPEC scan to determine the...
I did, yeah.
So the SPEC scan with Dr. Amen?
So I didn't have it with Dr. Amen. So in October of 2020, I was still a very normal person. I really thought that COVID was going to kill us all. And I was eating oatmeal for breakfast.
Oh my goodness.
And so
not the oatmeal part. That's perfectly normal for anyone out there, but yes.
And so I was afraid to get on an airplane to go to Atlanta in October of 2020 to go to the Amen Clinic. And so I did some research locally and I found a neurologist that would perform a SPECT scan. I think mine just turned off. So
yeah, mine also did.
You got a little dots on my forehead. I found I thought I was being so clever, right? I found a neurologist who would do a SPECT scan for what I thought was depression and burnout and overwhelm. And he sent me to just a clinic that does SPECT scans. So here's how they performed it. They put me in a dark room. They had me lie down on a bed. And I waited for 15 minutes just while they were preparing. So I was like, I'm bored. I'll meditate. And then I closed my eyes. So I meditated and reduced the activity in my frontal lobe. And my eyes were closed and reduced the activity in my vision center. So my SPECT scan came out as if I had had a major traumatic brain injury. And so I got misdiagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. And he starts to dig for what that could have been. Well, I bumped my head when I was 10. Oh, I see it all the time. It comes back to haunt people. I was like, no, it doesn't. He asked me to take a drug called nimodipine to get hyperbaric oxygen therapy and to do neurofeedback. And so nimodipine is used for stroke victims to open up the blood vessels of the brain to get oxygen everywhere. And when I went to the oxygen clinic, the doctor there asked me what protocol was recommended. And when I told him, he said, oh, Dr. So-and-so. And I was like, oh, why do you say that? And he said, well, he's the only one that recommends that drug. And I had already figured out it was off label and that it wasn't used for TBI.
I see.
I couldn't find any literature anywhere, even in the most remote places of fringe science, that would suggest nimodipine would ever be used for that. And so that question that he asked me allowed me to ask the question of myself, how far am I willing to go, and how trusting am I going to be of one doctor? That's when I stopped trusting authority. I mean, maybe that started when I was a teenager, but I didn't take the drug. And my ex-husband, my husband at the time, and the doctor, they sat me down in the office together and impressed upon me the importance of me getting better and how that was the only way. And if the doctor says you do it, you do it. And I said no. So I stand firmly with the idea that the first act of biohacking is no.
Yeah, it's sovereignty, isn't it? It's taking control of your own health.
That's right. Yeah.
Or at least finding another option so that you don't think that that's the only way, especially with something as severe as what you were going through.
Yeah. It would be interesting to know then, Sandy, what you've done subsequently to improve your brain health. Because obviously you're firing on all cylinders now. I mean, this is a big event. You've got a lot going on. You're always an active participant at all these events we see you at. So what have you done?
And also to know, like, which of the modalities or of things that you changed do you feel like had the biggest influence on shifting?
Well, I think that the most important message I can share with anybody is that while I started biohacking before I got to the root cause of what was wrong with me, none of it really helped. So I like to say that biohacking is about the present. It's about here and now and performance now. Like if I'm living every moment to my fullest, then I'm going to just keep doing that every single day. And that's a great way to live. But some of these devices, like my first near infrared light therapy device was the V-Light. I gave it to my mom because I prefer the CERA Thrive. But I used it and it didn't give me benefit because I had mold in my brain and it really wasn't helping that. And then I bought a hard shell 1.5 ATA oxygen chamber because we were serious about getting better and it gave me headaches. And so none of these, I had to stop using it until I found out it was mold and until I could start detoxing. There was really not much I could do. I did fix my sleep and I used the yellow glasses to help with that. And I took a lot of mitochondrial supporting supplements because I was biohacking and took some alpha GPC, but it didn't help, right? So I like to tell people that there's a blend that if it's not working, if you're trying, for example, if somebody tries the CERA Thrive and it doesn't make you feel energized and better, you probably have a root cause. And that's a really good signal that you need to detox and do something else and then come back and build the brain back up.
Interesting. So what was your detox program?
So this is where the story gets like really icky. I found a functional medicine doctor who would test me for mold. And I had to wait a month to get to see her. And so I read all the protocols before I saw her. And I knew by the time I got there what the Shoemaker protocol was, which is the standard protocol for getting mold out of the body. It's not exactly what I used, but it was enough to know that what she asked me to do was not protocol. But by that point, I was taking any drug and doing anything. She was a functional medicine doctor, and I had learned that word because of this process. I had never heard of functional medicine before any of this. And so I just trusted her because she was one of the good ones.
Yep.
And so she gave me nystatin, which is an antifungal that doesn't actually kill mold. And it did agitate it quite a bit, and whatever other fungus was in my body. And it gave me suicidal thoughts for the only 4 days of my entire life.
Oh, dear.
And so on the 5th day, I went to go take another one. And I was like, oh, you're new. And so I put it back and I called her. And I said, I can't take this drug. And she said, but it's the protocol. And I said, it's actually not the protocol. She said, yes, it is. I'm the doctor. And I was like, what? Okay, sure, you're the doctor. And I said, I'm not taking this drug. And then she said, I can't help you then. And so I had to find another doctor. And so I found a mold specialist, and this guy was $650 an hour. But that wasn't the whole, trouble. He required a $13,000 commitment to see him that I had to pay day one. And I had to pay in it half up front. And I should have taken that as a warning sign. He tested me for things he didn't need to test me for. even they even had guidelines. Like, we understand that mold rage is a problem. You can't argue back. There were all these parameters because they deal with people with mold issues. They have psychological issues, and you're going to have to agree up front to trust me in order to get seen by me. So beyond the money aspect, the funny thing about him is that the best thing, and I tweaked it yesterday for the first time, which I'll tell you about. He said that the number one thing you can do to get better is to, well, first move out of the moldy environment, which I did. The second is to not focus on your symptoms. And so if you're doing all the right things, to identify with the symptoms in the body blocks the body's natural ability to heal itself. It just creates this traffic jam, I guess, or it sends the wrong signals. You would know the science better than me, but to me, I think of it like a traffic jam. Like, the signal can't get there because my brain is blocking it. And so I had to take my brain somewhere else. And I took a neurolimbic rewiring program course online. And so for anyone listening, if you need to rewire, this is my trick that I learned from that. Stomp your foot, throw out your hands, and say no. And so no. Any symptom, it was just no. And then that got my brain to change. And funny enough, yesterday I was really struggling after 4 o'clock to stay focused. And so now my new trick is focus. And boy, did that bring me right back, because it's a pattern interruption. It stops everything that was going on inside my head. And I was able to get back to work.
Right.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason I fired him was because on my 2 return visits, he asked me what my symptoms were.
Yeah.
And the first time I gave him a pass. The second time I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah. You need to focus on where your healthy self, not your sick self. Right. I totally agree with that. So what do you do subsequently? Because I know you've got a CERA system, so you are using red light therapy.
I am.
So explain a bit about your protocol and how you work that into your schedule.
Well, I'll touch on just a little bit about the detoxing with mold before I go into the light therapy in my current biohacks. I use chlorella because after the nystatin, I knew I had to go slow because I had a Herx response. So chlorella was my chlorella and chia seeds were the 2 things that I took a lot of during that time as binders to help the mold get out. But beyond that, I didn't really do a lot besides frequencies. I bought the Healy at the time because it's recommended to do frequency specific microcurrent when someone is experiencing mold symptom, inflammation from mold. And so I had these little wrist things that pumped electrical frequencies into my body, and that helped a lot. I wouldn't have believed it, except that I felt better every single time I used it.
Right.
And then I went to a sound bath the first time I went to a sound bath right when I got my diagnosis. And I couldn't feel the vibrations on my toes on my first gong bath, but the second one a week later, I could. And I knew from the tuning fork test that I was not feeling vibrations in my toes. And so when I could feel my toes at that second gong bath, I knew, I was like, coming twice a week. This is helping. And so I lay down with my head towards the gongs, and it just helped because sound is better than vibration alone. Sound, the vibrations of the sound penetrate the body, penetrates the skull, penetrates the brain matter. And it really helps with that cerebral spinal fluid to drain. And so I bought a gong, and then I would just sit and just tap it and sit. And that's how I got the reputation of sitting in a corner playing gongs, was because it was part of my healing modality. But now what I've done is I've built a sound chair because whole body vibration is great and it will improve circulation and do all kinds of wonderful things. And that's what most sound beds are. They put sound in your ears and then they hit your body with vibrations. And they hit, like, some of the really cool ones, they hit your body pretty hard. It's like great massage. But it's in a room full of people and you don't want to disturb people. So they don't pump sound through the bed, just through the ears. But I wanted sound to penetrate my whole body the way that the gongs helped me from head to toe. And so I built a sound chair that pumps 36 hertz through the chair itself. And I lie down with that. I have an oxygen compressor that I use to breathe when I'm on it. And then I also use the CERA Thrive here, and my LumaFlex I put on my belly. So I just line them all up. And that's what I do on top of sauna now.
How come the 36 hertz that you use?
My theory is, and I've tested anything between 27 and 44. I really very rarely go to 40 or above, but I've read some research that suggests, well, there's a couple different forms of research. One is the light therapy at 40 hertz pulsing in the brain is shown to drain cerebral spinal fluid. I mean, obviously you guys know that. But they came out with an update to that study that they did it with sound, and sound at 40 hertz will do the same. I think they probably picked 40 as an arbitrary number because I think scientists like round numbers.
Yeah, like the sliding scale.
Yeah, so anything also...
a gamma frequency, 40.
You know,
it's the gamma frequency which the body does respond to. I mean, a lot of illnesses are connected with, you know, a misregulation of gamma or not. I mean, I think 40, you know, it's never going to be bang on 40, and the body never does anything like a metronome. And that's why in the CERA Thrive, actually, when it says 40, it's actually oscillating between 38 and 42. In fact, I think it's 36 and 44. We do like a higher oscillation because we want to deliver the pulsing in a way that's bioavailable.
God, I love that.
It's like, you know, you've heard of heart rate variability. Well, you have brainwave variability.
No shit.
So, you know, we want to deliver the frequency. So all the frequencies that you see in the CERA headband are delivered in a very variable way because that's how the body operates. Variation allows for resilience. Because
I had no idea.
Speed up or slow down. Yeah, for sure.
Love it.
Yeah.
It's the same with the sound files, I guess, as well, like the meditations versus, that's why there's options, because I guess it depends on what someone's wanting to.
Yes. And the sound files within the device, are a range of frequencies. You know, we're not, obviously, it would be a very boring song if it was just 40 hertz. But, you know.
Right. Well, now I'm going to create my own soundtrack that goes from 27 to 44 and raise it and lower it.
It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The whole thing about the pulsing in light therapy in particular is interesting because the reason why I have 100 hertz pulsing in there is actually that study was done on ultrasound, not light. It was done at the University of Arizona, where they were looking at people who are in a meditative state. And then if you pulse at 100 hertz with sound, they were using ultrasound, people could maintain meditation for longer and deeper. So I actually spoke to the researchers there and asked them if they thought that light would have the same effect, and they tested it and they said indeed it does. So I think the body is just responding to the frequency, not necessarily the delivery. You can deliver that via sound or via light or via electrical stimulation, but they probably have different qualities to the brain. But from a point of view of delivering a frequency, it means you can also stack, right? You've got you can stack sound and light and maybe even electrical stim if you've got that ability. So
I do. I didn't even think of doing my Healy at the same time. Oh my goodness. Okay. So the other reason why I choose frequencies in that range is that they've shown that whole body vibration between 30 and 50 hertz can release stem cells into the body. And so there's some debate on that. Like when I told Dr. Ian White about that, he was like, then you'll run out of stem cells. And I was like, I don't know if it works that way. and he's very concerned that we protect and conserve our body's ability to heal the way our body is intended to heal and not mess with it. And so I think that by the sound being able to penetrate bone marrow, that if there's something healing in my bone marrow that can get out, if the sound can go through, it's going to aid in that. And I don't know the science. It's just a suspicion I have that sound itself is more effective than vibration, anything dealing with bone.
I understand it. I understand Ian's he's saying that you don't want to force anything, right? You don't want to force the body to do something it doesn't want to do. But things like light, really what you're doing there is mimicking the sun. Things like sound, what you're doing there is mimicking kind of tribal ways of communicating and tribal dance. So I think anything where you're mimicking nature, you know, you're kind of on good solid ground there. The body wants to have good light. It wants to have sound. It wants movement. anything where you're stimulating something artificially, like, for example, with a pharmaceutical,
Right.
then I think, you probably are in that kind of area where you could potentially do more harm than good. So I think that is interesting. I'm also reading this whole thing about regenerative health is becoming a bigger thing now, isn't it? The whole
It is.
stem cells and regenerative health. And in fact, biohacking is kind of morphing into longevity and regenerative health too.
Yeah.
And I think any way that we can nurture that regenerative part of our biology, we're going to lead healthier, longer lives.
I think so too.
So I think light and sound is a good way to go. I can see you've got all the cymatics pictures behind you. This is how nature operates. It operates according to vibration. Vibration often is how things form, how you get the correct form of things. So, I love the fact that that's what you're tuned into, how you're using the light and sound like that.
Yeah, even on a just thinking about it in terms of an emotional and mental level of like your feelings and what frequencies affect, because music affects how we feel, right? So it would be interesting if there was a study done on if you stacked all of these things at once, and obviously our body's trying to reach state of harmony or state of like equilibrium, like in nature. So it'd be interesting if you're taking your body and your mind and your consciousness through that constantly, if that builds, also emotional resilience for allowing yourself to feel certain feelings, or it'd be very interesting.
I know that it helps heart rate variability. I would love to know more about brainwave variability. Can you speak to that a little bit more? Because you blew my mind. I'd never heard of that.
Well, when you think of like heart rate variability, why is the heart rate variable? It's so that you allow flexibility in the system. I'm sitting here quietly now, but if a tiger came straight through this window right now, because I have variation in my heart rate, I can have very fast heart rate or very slow, I would be able to react. And the more, or conversely, if I need to kind of slow down, I can do that if you've got variation in the system. If something's going like a metronome, you have to either come up or come down to respond to a situation, and that takes time and energy. So the body likes to kind of hedge its bets, and it puts variation within the system to give you flexibility. And that applies to everything that's going on in the body. The body is oscillating at different frequencies. The heart has a frequency, the gut has a frequency, the brain has a frequency. So anything where you have a biological system, the more variable that signal, the more healthy the organism is. So brain, we have different states for, when we're asleep, we have alpha rhythms, we have gamma rhythms. These are all just broad names for what the brain is doing. And actually, it's probably a lot more complex because we're just talking about on one scale. The brain is also doing this on various different scales, from the very small to the very large. We're just looking at hertz, which is an oscillation per second, because it suits the time scale that we live at, right? We kind of live in this moment to moment, but actually the brain's doing things very fast and very slow. So of course we have that variation within brainwaves. So when we talk about a gamma frequency of 40 hertz, we also want to have variation within that system, the same way as you would of heart rate variability. So yes, you have brain rate variability too. And it's not something people talk about too much because we don't monitor it so much.
Yeah, I was about to ask, is there a way to train it?
I think it's the same as you train heart rate variability. You just need to train resilience in your body. So all the things that we're doing, all the hacks that I'm sure people are going to be able to try out when they come to your show, people are going to be there showing you like maybe how to monitor heart rate variability, how to maybe track your a QEEG. An EEG is the way that you monitor your brain waves. Although again, you're kind of looking at a superficial level. So at the moment, we've just got a guess into what's going on in the brain. We can see what's going on in the surface with QEG, and that's interesting. Maybe the SPECT scans you're talking about, although, then...
What about Kernel? Have you used Brian Johnson's Kernel device?
I haven't used it, but there are all kinds of devices where you can have some idea of what's going on in the brain. But there's none, as far as I know, that actually look at the variation within your brain waves at the moment. At the moment, there's no one that I've seen talking about brainwave variation and looking to see how variable the signal is coming from your brain. I think we're just not quite at that level of sophistication of monitoring, but we do know it exists.
Maybe this gives someone an idea.
Yeah, maybe. Someone come to Sandy's show, please, and tell us how
we make one.
Yeah.
But certainly
It's
lots of
amazing.
people are monitoring all different things to do with your biology. And like I say, I'm sure there's going to be lots of people with tech at your show that will show people how to do that. But yeah, that's why I think when you're delivering any signal to the body, you also want to deliver it in a variable way.
Yeah.
Because,
well, we do have 2 talks at the show about heart rate variability, and there are a few vendors that are offering different kinds of devices for that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be very interesting for people, and people can then get an understanding of variation in biology and how that works. People tend to talk about variation when they're measuring, not always when you're putting the therapy in, so to deliver something in a variable way is probably something the body is going to recognize more because it's the way it's working itself. This is what I mean when I say I think we should try and deliver things as close to nature as we can. And then we're not in this situation where we are interfering with what the body's doing. We're just working with the body's own innate healing processes.
Have you ever used the HeartMath Inner Balance device?
Yeah, I used to go around doing workshops on HeartMath, many, many moons ago. Yeah, all of those things where you're getting that's the heart-brain connection. We talk about the gut-brain connection with CERA, but yeah, the heart-brain connection, a lot of it, you can just do it through breath work. You can modulate your breath to get your heart and your brain waves into that coherence state.
Yeah, I really suck at that. And my HRV is terrible. I'll walk around just regular life at around a 30. And then
I think that's too terrible, Sandy. And I also think you're kind of only comparing to yourself, because it's very difficult to say this is the ideal heart rate variability. You just want to have a heart rate variability that's trending upwards as you do.
I just want the heart rate variability of an Olympic athlete, no expectations or anything, right? But I found a hack for that. I chant. So I chant for about 3 minutes. And on my Apple Watch, if I set the meditation timer to 3 minutes, it will trigger a recording of my HRV. And so if I'm at a 30 and then I take 3 minutes and do chants, 6 seconds in for my breath and 6 seconds out with an then I'll go from 30 to 70 immediately. And if I do it for 12 minutes, I can get over 100. It just depends on the time I have and what I'm doing. But I do that. I've been trying to increase my body's resiliency since I found out about HeartMath, which I think was 2012, 2013.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. You can combine that with things like pulsed light then in order to get the brain to come into that coherence. If you modulate it, that's why in the app for the CERA Thrive app, we have the breath work. Because that also enables because if you're trying to get your brain to be more resilient and develop that kind of diversity of brain waves, having those different breathing practices, like, what you're doing, that is going to really help. We actually have Pavel of Noah and Non, who does a lot of our breath work in the app. And then Chantel actually has given us some lovely ambient music that goes in the app where you can also get your body and brain to sync up with those frequencies.
Lovely. Yeah. I haven't heard those. Now I'm going to explore.
No, they were initially, because I used to write, I was speaking to Sarah about it. You talk about frequencies of trying to understand soundscapes that would help someone fall asleep, or because like each meditation versus sleep versus spa have slightly different, obviously, states that you want to achieve. So they were sort of we've kind of chosen them to sync up with potential, like they have natural elements, like Sarah was saying, within them as well.
That's awesome.
Sandy, actually, with all these things we're talking about, with like stem cell, regenerative, and devices, modalities, at your expo, I'm so curious to know, what are you not the most curious about necessarily, but like how excited do you think for 2025 or as a new year? Is there anything you think that versus all the stem cells and regenerative? Because I feel like that was a big focus on a lot of the events we were all at, especially towards the end of last year. Is there something else, or do you feel like
there's 2 things at the event that I'm really proud of? So the first is connected to what we're talking about. So Mark Serto used to be the audio engineer at the Monroe Institute, and was creating the HemiSync tracks. Yep. And so now he's running the Triad Mind, and he has his own meditation program. And we're going to talk about how biohacking is more than our physical bodies, that we have this electromagnetic field, and there's more to order about ourselves than just the tissues and the cells. And so that's one of my favorite talks that we're going to do. I'll be interviewing him on stage to cover that.
Awesome.
And then I'm really, really happy about the opportunity to push back on the FDA. I think that we've got some good signs that we're going to perhaps get these tools into the hands of more people because we'll be able to talk about them more freely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I booked Andrew Bustamante, who is he's a former CIA operative who has a company called Everyday Spy. And he was confused at first as to what it was I really wanted him to say. And I said, well, you know how to have a covert conversation. And our exhibitors need to know how to better communicate what their products do to our attendees who need to learn how to listen better to what these things mean. And so there's only so much you're allowed to say in the United States anyway about what red light does. And so your marketing has to be in accordance with the regulations of the FDA and the FTC, even though it's been demonstrated safe and effective for all kinds of things. But you can't put it on the label. You can't list all the things it is effective at treating. Once we use the word treat, you'll just get shut down in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the very first things my mom said to me when I bought the V-Light, she said, well, if that works, why doesn't everybody know about it? And I didn't know how to answer her until a few months ago. I didn't know that there was restriction on speech in the United States about what these safe and effective devices can do. And so Andrew's going to speak to that a little bit. And then I think that this is what I really want to make known to people is that we want these things to be approved.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to say what they can do. FDA cleared is not enough. We want FDA approval. We want the money incentive out of the system that skews all of the approvals towards things that can be patented for high profit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big message I'm trying to convey this year is that we want it approved and affordable.
That's great. And you've got someone speaking to that?
Yes.
Oh, that's fabulous.
That's going to be really great.
Yeah, that's going to be really good, yeah.
Because that was going to be a question I had for you, in terms of the Biohacker Expo, just you personally, because with a lot of these things like elite health and science versus everyday wellness for someone who can't afford things like that, it's a question, maybe also because I'm from South Africa, I feel like that's a question that I get a lot. It's like, well, what could someone do, just to make it more accessible? But my question for you would be, do you have a suggestion for anyone of where they could start if they couldn't afford expensive wellness devices like before? Hopefully they become more affordable, and we're all working towards getting to that point, right, where you could, whether you get it at your local clinic or pharmacy or you're just able to afford it more, in terms of like a small accessible thing or things that you could suggest to anyone listening.
Yes. My cousin texted me the other day and he said, what do you think about lion's mane? And I said, I think you should stop eating McDonald's first.
Very good point.
I think biohacking starts with no. And there are so many things to say no to. I mean, you might be overwhelmed if you go to my website and click on the link about the 19 biovillains. But I've referenced studies about how each of these chemicals and, it's just the pesticides and the chemicals and the phthalates and all of these things and the plastics. There's so much. I link to studies for every single one that shows the harm they're doing to the body and make a recommendation for detoxifying. And so it's a really simple list that says, in a fun way, with pictures of biovillains of like, I've got what if mold was a villain in a comic book, right? So I'm trying to bring my old Comic-Con vibe to the table and have a fun discussion about the things that are causing chronic disease.
Yeah,
and
there's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit that anyone can do.
Yeah.
And then your website then, Sandy. People are going to want to see where to find the villains.
Yes.
It's biohackerexpo.com.
Okay, cool. Which is where all the event details are, all the speakers.
And your personal profile, or do you have any personal pages that you want people to follow as well?
It's all just at biohackerexpo.com.
Great.
Biohackerexpo.com.
We started doing this, I say this is the second episode we're going to be doing this, but these rapid fire questions, if you're up for them. It's just, you just answer, it's kind of like a yes or no, but you can answer anything that comes to mind. So the first one, if I say cold plunges, would you love or leave?
Oh. It's 8 degrees outside right now. I'm not a fan of the cold.
Okay. Fasting, game changer or fad?
Both.
Okay. Fair. Health retreats, essential or indulgent?
Depends.
Wearables, transformational or temporary?
I'm really annoyed by the EMFs coming off of my Apple Watch. I feel like I can feel them. And so I love my Apple Watch and I'm trying to let go of it.
Well, it's a question, even with these Aura rings, for both of you guys, actually a question. With disconnecting Bluetooth or wearables in general, what are your thoughts?
I stopped wearing mine.
I wear mine. I do turn the Bluetooth off overnight and it still keeps the data and you can upload it in the day.
That's what I was worrying.
So we travel a lot, the amount of radiation that you're getting off a plane or a hotel in Miami, it's such a drop in the ocean. I mean, I'm here in England. I'm trying to keep everything cool here, but I don't know what the people in the flat below me are doing. So realistically, like Sandy said, I don't focus on it. I don't focus on that non-native EMF. I try and be as clean as possible. Like with the CERA Thrive device, you can turn off all the Bluetooth and program it and it still runs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sandy.
I didn't know that.
You're like the little...
Oops, I should have told you. Yeah.
You'll show me how to use it in February.
Yeah, there's a little knob because I think that there's things you can do to limit your exposure, right? Yeah. So on the CERA Thrive headband, once you set the program, there's a Bluetooth disable. So you don't have to have the Bluetooth right on your head there. Yeah, this is a little Bluetooth disable switch. And then the same with the Aura, like I say, there are ways to mitigate these things. You just got to weigh up the risks. We want to use all this tech. So just try and find little ways. I turn my internet off at night, regardless of what anybody around me is doing, But we have to live in this world. You can't go to a baker's or sit in a cafe without being surrounded by, 20 Wi-Fis. So to say that you're not going to have it on your ring, I don't know. Try not to have things. It's because it's right on your body. Try as much as possible to limit. But at the same time, I get value from my ring because I'm doing a lot of self-experiments. If I'm doing a new program in the CERA Thrive device, I want to be able to track it. I want to be able to track my sleep. I want to be able to track heart rate. So you have to weigh up the pros and cons.
Yeah.
The primary reason why I stopped wearing my Aura ring was so that I could ignore my symptoms.
Yes, good idea. Yeah.
It was giving me, once I started really going back to work and started running an event, my HRV was low, my sleep scores were low. I also think that the last version I bought was not attuned correctly to HRV because it dropped 20 points from one ring to the next. And so that really bothered me. It was reading my HRV at 13 and I felt like that was an old version that wasn't as effective. Or but they told me it was. So then I got scared that the first version was overinflating it. And then I just got scared that I was just about to die. And I was like, I can't wear this anymore. Okay. So I need the new upgraded version in order to trust that I can go back in and start measuring my sleep properly.
I think all of these things are never going to be totally accurate. What I tend to think is just compare yourself because they're going to be accurate in one person. So even if it's not reading the actual value, you can see whether you're going up or down rather than getting too hung up on the actual
great advice
value. Yeah.
I was going to say also not looking at it all the time so you feel like you're already going to have a bad day because sometimes you have to override that. So it's like I'll look in a week.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to know I had a bad night's sleep or something like that.
Brilliant. But it was lovely to have you on, Sandy, and I'm really looking forward to the event. We're going to be there with our red light team, red light for all. So, we're looking forward to coming and bringing some red light there and seeing all the other things. I'm really looking forward to all your cool speakers. So.
Thank you. I'm so excited to see you guys again.
Yes.
We're going to have fun.
I want to do a shout out to all the listeners to check out the Biohacker Expo. So biohackerexpo.com. In Miami, happening, coming up. And we'll see you super, super soon. And if anyone enjoyed this episode, to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Thank you for listening to the Rebel Scientist podcast. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andy. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Breaking the gray.